Greetings. This is Griff Roby with the 10th of these science fiction stories published by Isaac Asimov. And this one crosses a very important goal or threshold. And that would be that for the first time, his story is featured on the cover of the magazine. Half-Breeds on Venus by Isaac Asimov. And underneath, it still has other stories. M.W. Wellman, Malcolm Jameson just has their names. He didn't say their stories. It does say his because this is a scene from the story. We'll talk a little bit about that scene briefly, but that's really an accomplishment. For the first time, he, as they say, made the cover. It has an interesting background because, in several ways. One was that when he wrote his first Half-Breed story, first some fan wrote into him and said, "That's a great story. I sure would like you to write a sequel." Then a little later on, the editor of Astonishing, his friend Fred Pohl, said, "Yeah, Isaac, I'd like you to write a sequel to that." So, it's the first story now specifically requested of him. It's also the first time he writes a sequel. That's what he was striking. If you could have a series, this is a good thing, especially for a struggling author, because as long as some of the segments are strong, they might sustain some of the weaker ones, and it's probably the closest thing to job security that a struggling young author, still barely known to the world, can have to kind of have job security. You write a story and it belongs to the series, and as long as it's not too horrible, it's kind of like you pretty much got a sale. Of course, we're dealing with Half-Breed here. This is not generally regarded as one of the best stories. It does have one other thing of some interest, something very, very rarely seen in early Isaac Asimov stories. And I do mean rarely. In fact, the only glimpse of it, interestingly enough, is in the original Half-Breed. And that is the aspect of romance. Now, in the original, we have this sort of arranged marriage, if you will, arranged something, get together, of Max and Madeline by their honorary or adoptive father, Jefferson Scanlon. And by the way, now everybody takes the name of Scanlon because it's like they're all his children, although Scanlon is just a normal human being, whereas these beings are tweenies, half-breeds between Earth people and Martians. We never see the Martians, but apparently it seems to be a very strong and thriving combination, and apparently also a fertile one. Which is, when you think about it, pretty amazing. But yeah, too amazing. It's unrealistic. It's kind of one of those pulp sci-fi tropes of aliens that are sufficiently humanoid that you can even interbreed with them, even though they might even have a different bodily chemistry. I mean, good grief, it's like, humans and Vulcans, I mean, humans have a blood based on iron, Vulcans have a blood based on copper. Even their biology is different, and yet they can interbreed. Of course, like I said, I don't know that Spock has any children. He may be like a mule. I just mean that like doesn't breed mule, not like the Foundation character. So, not intended. So he wrote it. He gets it on the cover. It also gets to be the feature story. Let's say the first one listed in the table of contents, right there on the top as page 6. Half-Breeds on Venus by Isaac Asimov, page 6. And the little blurb there says, "The tweenies land on Venus and are pursued by their terrestrial enemies." Okay. Alright. Sorry, I've interrupted myself. Let me get back to what else is exceptional, and that was this bit about the romance. The first one had just this little bit of an arrangement between, Max and Madeline get the name of Scanlon because of Jefferson Scanlon. But it's all kind of arranged. Max is lonely. Jefferson decides to help in that regard. He looks around and sees what seems to be a nice, reasonable, right age, desirable looking by his human standard, female tweenie, Madeline, brings it there, and at first they're all kind of shy and so forth. And then he just goes in the other room, and his older housekeeper, monthly lady in the house, kind of does all this womanly, helping them break the ice sort of thing. And later on, Max and Madeline hit it off. In this story, we see Max and Madeline again, now much older, and newly getting settled on the planet Venus. Because in the other one, it ended pretty much with them going off to Venus, and they felt bad that they had to leave while Jefferson Scanlon was still alive, but situations forced that eventuality, and fortunately they were prepared for that. So this is part 2. It is the sequel, and now there's more romance. Now we get actually a little bit of actual romance in this case, because when he was writing this story, he was finally having his first interactions with a girl that he was mooning over, whose name is Irene, and hence the name of the girl in here is also Irene. Okay. And so you get a little bit of the romance. It's still clumsy, it's still very inadequate. He's not a romance author, he's just not. But, he's attempting it. And now he actually has a small bit of life experience to base it on. He took this Irene to a few dates. They're just normal things, like to symphony concerts and things like that. So, but they went out several times, and then she moved on, and that was kind of the end of that. Apparently, they did meet many, many years later. It was like, oh, wow, nice to see you after all these years. She's all happily married to somebody, and she had some career of some kind, and of course, we all know what he did, and so, it was kind of nice to find an old acquaintance between the two of them, but that's all it was. But God, he really thought she was something special back when he was dating her and writing this story. Because it's the main story, something else kind of neat happens. You get several illustrations in the story, or among the stories. So now, let's take a look at this. Here's more of our tweenies. Of course, how to figure out how to do this. Alright, so, you can see, now, these are the next generation of tweenies. And, you see, the guy tweenies still have this streaky hair that goes straight up all the time. It's kind of suitably alien weird, okay. The girls, for some reason, their hair, well, I wonder if he could be credited, or his art illustrator here, could be credited as being the inventor of the beehive hairdo that would become kind of a thing about 20 years later. So, I don't know. The guys have this freaky looking hair. The girls seem to have this natural beehive. Between these characters, you can kind of see parts of 2 pages. This is very weird looking creature. And they call it's an amphibian, or they just call them Fib. Hey there, Fib. How you doing, Fib? Hiya, Fib. And Fib apparently has brought them together. There's another artifact that's kind of cool in the picture, and it gets mentioned in the story. This little gun you see him holding, and again, you also see each of them holding a gun. Let's see here, there, and there. They call these guns tonite. I guess it hits like a ton kind of a thing. I don't know. It's kind of neat to see some of the same artifacts surface again and again. Tonite guns surface from time to time in his stories. They've been seen before. I didn't comment on them, but they've been seen before, and they'll be seen again. I think they even get mentioned as late as this Galactic Empire series. So that's not bad. Other places mention little Asimov bulbs, which in other places are described as having this kind of early light that they generate. I guess an Asimov bulb is atomically powered light fixture or something. Portable. So that's kind of cool. Portable or small, I'm not sure. Both. At any rate, so there's all these things. Later on, we'd see the neuronic whip. Well, I haven't seen that one yet, but soon we all know that comes along. That's in the Foundation. That is in the Galactic Empire, and I think we even see that beyond. So the neuronic whip. So there's a lot of these things, and before long will be the jump through hyperspace. That'll turn up soon. That's in Foundation, certainly, and maybe some other places. So there's a lot of interesting technology. Now, well, let's just look a little bit at the story. The story is actually it's a fairly reasonable story. I think you could actually make a reasonable plot out of it, or science fiction television program out of it today. Because they've arrived on a planet, well, Venus, obviously they're not Venus as we actually know it, a Venus that's very Earth-like, full of lush vegetations and lakes and mountains and rivers and lots of living creatures of various sorts. A couple of whom are relevant in this story, one of whom being these Phibians or amphibians I've mentioned, and so forth, and another one being these kind of big dinosaurs, centosaurs, these 20-legged creatures. Well, cent means hundreds. I'm not quite sure what we're saying. Centosaur, or a dinosaur that has 20 legs, 10 on each side, I guess. It's bilateral symmetry. Kind of a Tyrannosaurus Rex looking creature. You see it here portrayed on the cover. So there would be that. But they arrive on Venus. They're kind of wanting to hide from the humans. I guess the Martians too, but maybe the Martians aren't too interested in taking up residence on Venus much. But the Earth people have begun to, even though it's still a small handful, and they're widely scattered and they're way elsewhere, and it's like a hope that it will take a long time before they wander to the part of Venus they're settling on. Well, as it turns out, it's not very long at all. They really barely had a chance to begin setting up. They're going to build all these underground caves and everything. So they're doing that anyway, so that all the important stuff, their power generators, their laboratories, all the important things, all their storage and so forth, they had to hide underground for a while. They could just go completely underground, or they could be on the surface. And I don't know what they're supposed to be doing going on the surface. There's no evidence they've grown any farms, or the Earth people who say, hey, who's growing a farm here? That doesn't seem to be analyzed. I don't know why. Maybe on the surface they just live as hunter-gatherers or something. I don't know. So, as the humans arrive to the general area and never seem to suspect that the tweenies are living right there almost under their feet. So they need to do something. They want to drive the humans away. But if they drive the humans away, if there's enough of them to do that, which there is, the humans will come back in force and probably kill them all off. If they don't drive them away, then they gotta sit there and hide until they can finish building this invisible force field that for some reason needs going into the fourth dimension to create a spherical force field. I guess I could kind of see how that would work. You could make just suppose in Flatland you wanted to make a force field that was like a circle or something. You could have something in the third dimension above the plane projecting like a cone of power. That cone would intersect space as we know it as a circle, and you get this circular thing. Because you put the beam sender inside the plane of it, beams just go in straight lines. And so you don't get your circle, you get something else. So he wants to do this spherical thing from the fourth dimension. And they're figuring how to do that. They're really smart, they're really ambitious. Presumably they will figure that out. Amazing. That fourth dimension. We don't even know how to get there. Can't even begin to think of how we get there. But they're going to come up with some way, presumably, and they're working on it. So, but in the meantime, they don't have their force field. All they can do is hide underground and keep out of sight and hope no Earther sees any of them. That takes some doing. But an interesting thing has happened. And I guess this is kind of, the tweenies are, they come from really like a race. They come from a race of people that have been persecuted, and somehow they've managed to be better than the persecutors, which is always a good thing, and really be decent beings. They meet up with these creatures in the lake, the amphibians, or Fibs. Fibs turn out to be a kind of telepathic aspect to them. You shake hands with them, and you can, by shaking hands, you can communicate to them just directly mind to mind. That was amazing. So, if you could do that, they kind of make friends with these beings. The beings are interested in the tweenies because of their extraordinary hair, which, by the way, is also white. And they're kind of wanting to, let's feel that. This is really interesting stuff. So they're curious about it, and the Tweenies are okay. Sure, go ahead. Oh, that's really neat meeting you and all. And I see your children, and I hold your baby, and they're doing all this kind of stuff with the amphibians. So they're real friendly. And then the the humans have shown up, and they're wondering what to do, and they figure, well, maybe the amphibians could think of something, and they can. The amphibians have enough power to manipulate several of these big centaurs from someplace, I don't know, down in the lowlands somewhere, I don't know, and somehow compel them or whatever, maneuver them to kind of move up the river to the more like where the humans and the Venusians, the Tweenies are. And they get kind of manipulated up there. They have their roars, they're scary creatures, but they're kind of hard to control. The amphibians have to exert a lot of effort. And towards the end, it's like, oh, I don't think we can hold on to this much longer. You know, and in case they can't, this is why two of the next generation Tweenies, Henry and Irene, are working together with the amphibians. They brought their termite guns so that they can basically kill off these rather mindless centaurs when they're through with them. But first they've got to lure them up and have them come along and intimidate the humans. And so it's like, it's not to blame anybody, it's just the indigenous life is dangerous here, we need to move on. So they get out of the world, get out of there, go somewhere else, and the humans will leave that area alone for a good long time because, oh, there's dangerous life forms here. You see? Now you don't blame the people, you don't come after them. So it's kind of clever. And it's the kind of thing you can do when you take the time to befriend somebody and they may turn out to be very helpful in ways you don't expect. Probably a good lesson. And, you never know, who you show some kindness to may turn out to be in a position to do you some very substantial favor. So I think that's a good lesson. I think it's which means despite the obvious pulpishness of Venus being an inhabitable world and now getting populated by about more than 1,000 of these Tweenie beings that are half-breeds between humans and Martian beings. So I guess meaning Mars must also have been not only habitable but inhabited by intelligent, rational, sufficiently humanoid species to interbreed with us. So you're going to get a lot of interesting stuff. Now, again, because this is one that doesn't get reprinted much of anywhere, it shows up like so many others of these early Asimov era stories. It shows up in the early Asimov. And so the goal here is to try to reprint it as faithfully as possible. And I haven't detected any textual difference. There's the artwork. There's also the little squibs. I've read the one in the table of contents. There's another one on the main page which reads, "The Tweenies land on Venus and enlist the aid of Venus creatures to fight off their pursuers." So, now we've seen the two of them in this first cover with an amphibian, and I'm not sure, but I think the idea is that this fellow here is Henry Scanlon, and this lady here is Irene. Okay, and the amphibian between them has introduced them together or helped with their romance. Because again, even though they're having these adventures together, they're still kind of shy and not sure what to do and so forth. But they are together, they are talking, and they clearly and obviously have feelings for each other. We have another shot here. Probably this is them having newly arrived on Venus, and they're in the woods kind of exploring, or maybe kind of finding a little bit of a romantic moment. I'm not quite sure. I couldn't find exactly a moment that looks like that picture, but there's places where they're leaning against trees and things, and I guess that's supposed to be that. And we have one more. Now, this is another one. Again, now we see our amphibian as a more of a whole creature. So it's kind of an interesting look. And he's shaking hands with the guy. Now, you could think maybe he's introduced them, or it almost looks like he's congratulating them on their marriage or something. But I think what's really going on here is this is the part where by shaking hands, Henry communicates to the Fib that what he wants to do with the centaurs to scare away the humans. And Fib thinks about it and says, "I think we can do something for you, sure." And there's Irene once again at his side, and the two of them are going along together. So, as they get to the end of the story and they chase the humans away, the centaurs, of course, are in fact pretty dangerous creatures, and the Fibs have been worn out their brains trying to keep these dinosaurs from enough to put them where they want them to scare off the humans, but not hurt the Phibians themselves, obviously, nor their tweeny friends. Okay, including Henry and Irene, who we also see here on the cover. So, but at the end, you need to kill them off, and you can see Henry there zapping one of the centaurs with his tunite gun, and she's got hers armed for another one because they brought three of them along, but you just see the one. And that's the story, and like I said, it's easy to dismiss these as garbage, but they're not great literature, but it isn't to say they don't have interesting features to them. So on the whole, I found it kind of neat. Like I said, it's great being on the cover. The first color portrayal of any of his scenes from any of his stories to be published. Well, thank you for listening to that.